Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and it's time for a quick update on the Dark Zones campaign, The Road to Tenebris, and where we've got to in the last week since the last update. So what I'll do is I'll put some pictures up and talk through what's happened. Let's get straight into the video. Now we are closing in, the campaign is this month on the 28th of September, so we have 25 days to go, so just over 4 weeks to get this army fully up to date and ready to rock and roll. So it's been a busy week. I have been furiously painting lots of stuff. So since you last saw the update, I've managed to complete the Zanga Shaymin and the full unit of Enlightened. These guys are fully done. And also I've managed to nearly finish my cultists. Now I am going to stick with the original Chaos Cultist models, the really old sculpted ones. They're not particularly sexy, but they will do the job. I'm just not going to have the time to do the conversions that I wanted to do, I don't think. So I'm just going to get these guys done and go from there. And if I do get that time, then I'll try and make the effort, but I don't think I will due to some other commitments between now and the event. So I'm going to put some pictures up and just quickly talk through those. So first up is the Zanga Shaymin. Now I just did a video on how to use him, so my in-depth video. I'll put a little card up in the corner if you've missed that video. He is a great little buffing unit for 90 points. He's not great on his own, but he does offer some awesome buffs for the rest of my army composition. So I've managed to get a couple of decent shots on my gaming mat just to show you how he's looking. I've tried to make all the discs look a little bit different, but all swirling up on that green flamey fire. And he's a bit of a hybrid colour. He's not the full light colour that the Enlightened are, and he's not the full dark blue that the Zangors on foot are. Here he is in front of some lovely looking containers. Just part of the game that I had earlier this week. Really happy the way that he has actually come out. Now as I mentioned, I've got 10 cultists. These are the original Chaos Cultist models. They're not the most exciting models in the range, but they will do nicely. So I've just started working on the blue and the brown on those. There's still quite a bit more to go on those, but I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on these. You know, 10 models for 40 points. I'm not going to go overkill on these, but I just need to do a little bit more to make them pop, make them look like they're wearing Tzeentchian robes and part of the Force. Now these are the ones I'm really happy with, right? These are the Zangor Enlightened, so they all ride little discs. Those discs grant them the keyword of Demon, and that is quite essential to some of the buffs and powers that my army can spit out, enhancing demon keyworded models, Tzeentch demon models in fact. So normally my Herald that I have that's running with my Flamer element, he buffs all my other Tzeentch demons, so my Flamers and Exalted Flamers, but these guys can also be buffed by them, giving them an increase in strength. So really happy with the way they turned out, and this is the progress photo of everything in the 1750 list. You can see there, pretty much everything is good to go except that Mutalith Vortex Beast on the left. So what I'll do is I'll run through the list for you. So I have 2 Exalted Sorcerers in my battalion detachment. Those are the 2 required HQs. I then have 3 troops, so 1 unit of Zangors. They're split on the photo, but there is a single unit of Zangors. I then have a unit of 10 Cultists, which are sat up the back there, which we've just shown a few moments ago. And then followed by a unit of 10 Rubric Marines, with 2 Warp Flamers and a Soul Reaper cannon, because you just have to. A Zanga Shaymin fits into my elite slot in that same battalion. And then finally, filling out that, we have some Enlightened, which I've already just shown you as well. And then we have a couple of heavy support slots in that battalion. First being the Forge Fiend, which is my anti-aircraft battery in effect. He shoots down enemy flyers as best possible. Then finally, the Mutalith Vortex Beast, which is a buffing unit for multiple different types of Heretic Astartes. Now my Demon Detachment, which is a Vanguard, is a Flux Master, which is basically a Herald on a disc, followed by 8 Flamers, Flamers of Tzeentch, and followed by 2 heavy support choices, which are 2 Exalted Flamers, 2 individual units of Exalted Flamer goodness. The thing that's going to make this list work or not work is the power selection and making sure that I take the appropriate powers and buffs to make the composite units work with the most efficiency. So the two Exalted Sorcerers, one of which is my Warlord, both have a relic each. So Helm of the Third Eye and Dark Matter Crystal. And then from a powers perspective, the first one has Death Hex, which removes enemy invulnerable saves, and Warp Time to enable an extra free move of a unit. The Warlord himself is running Prescience and Weaver of Fates. So that's an increase to hit and an increase in invulnerable saves for one of my friendly units. The only upgrade in the Zangor unit is to take a Brayhorn. Now the Brayhorn gives me +1 to advance and or +1 to my charge range, which is very handy. And the main benefit of the Brayhorn there, combined with Warp Time for one of my Psykers, is to get those Zangors into close combat as quickly as possible. Now my Shaymin is actually running Glamour of Tzeentch, and that makes the enemies subtract 1 from any hit roll, so that's whether shooting or melee against a unit that psychic power is in effect of. And again, the idea is to keep my close combat units alive, so that could be targeted on the Enlightened or the Zangor unit as well. So depending how the battle goes, I could end up with a Zangor unit with a 4+ invulnerable save and the enemy being -1 to hit. And that's going to, those combinations are what's going to keep a large blob of cheap units alive and doing the damage to the enemy whilst minimising the impact of the return combat. The Forge Fiend himself, as I've mentioned before, he is my anti-aircraft guy. He runs 2 Hades autocannons. The idea then is that one of my Psykers gets Prescience off onto him to give him +1 to hit. And then you use the stratagem in order to get rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound. And then you target enemy flyers with that double whammy combo. The Flux Master, his power is Flickering Flames and Boon of Change. I don't expect to use Boon of Change, but because he can take 2 powers on top of Smite, that's the one I'm going with. Flickering Flames is the key one here, and that's add 1 to any wound rolls made for that unit's shooting weapons of a Tzeentch Demon unit. Now the idea of that is to stick that power onto the Flamers. Now there's Flamers auto hitting with +1 strength because the Flux Master gives +1 strength, and then adding that +1 to wound if that power goes off makes them very, very deadly against a lot of highest toughness units. That's going to round out all the psychic powers. Obviously everyone knows Smite, but realistically for this army to work and to give all those added strength and all those sneaky tricks and added stratagems and so on, I'm probably going to rely more on the buffing powers like Prescience, like Warp Time and so on to make each and every unit as more powerful as possible. And because of the change of keywords due to certain war gear, like those Discs of Tzeentch granting Demon, means that a lot more powers are a lot more applicable to various units. Which means game by game and situation by situation, depending on what turns up and what the objectives are and so on, I've got as much flexibility in this list as I can possibly achieve. And the list has got some good combat, some good shooting, some good mid-range stuff and some good buffs. Hopefully those situations will play into my hands. It's either that or Tzeentch is going to bless me with lots of rolls of a 1. Such is the fickle nature of Tzeentch. So there we go then guys, that is the update on the Road to Dark Zones, the Tenebrous campaign. Quite a lot done, quite a large number of models done really. I think my original count was about 38 models I needed to do to complement the ones I'd already done. And I've got a large portion of those done now, so I'm really happy with the progress in the last week. I think my Enlightened look really, really cool, and they certainly work on the battlefield as well, which is good to see. The problem is all these units that I've done are cheap as chips, and from a point perspective, yeah, I'm not making a big dent in any kind of points limit, but I am making a big dent in the model count. Now before I end this video, just a quick couple of words about a game that I did have this week. So just on the past Saturday, I faced Ian from White Shark Gaming Studios, and we had a full 1750 test. Now he's not convinced about his list just yet, but he is an orc player. He is sour and bitter that he still doesn't have a codex, but aren't they all? But he wanted to try out a Speed Freaks list. Now this is a very thematic list for campaigns. So it's built, purely Cult of Speed. So he had 9 units of bikers, all big, large units of bikers. A mech on a bike with a custom force field, a warlord on a bike as well, and then one of the Forge World characters, Zagstruck, I think it is, might be not right, but he's on a Ripper bike. Then one of the fighter jets, I can't remember which version it is, but it's not the one with all the mortal wound bombs. Then 2 Chinooks loaded with burner boys. So a very, very fast list and quite high toughness. Those bikes, double wounded, toughness 5, was going to be an interesting test. Now being super quick and being super killy and choppy when they get into combat, that's going to be my biggest fear. but I knew I was going to get at least a couple of good rounds of shooting and potentially be able to outmaneuver. It's not as if my army's slow. Some of the tricks with the dark matter crystal, being able to teleport a unit around, my enlightened, and everything that's on a disc has a move of 12. That's only 2 inches shorter than a bike unit, so I mean they move 14. So I do have the ability to almost keep them at arm's length and then try and force them into my flamers. So I did this whole counter-attack idea. I put my Rubric Marines at the front in some terrain. Tried to encourage all the shooting at those, because when they're in terrain and against damage 1, they effectively have a 1+ save. But really, you know, we all know that 1s fail, so any modifiers, they were still getting a 2+ save. They took an awful lot of the shooting from these Assault 6 bikes that come with these Dakar guns that fire out everywhere. These Chinooks that are flying in, unloading burner shots out of the open top nature of that, and also the chin-mounted heavy flamer that they have as well. So I took an awful lot of fire, but then that enabled me to counter quite heavily. Even though a lot of my psychic powers actually failed, I think I fluffed the first 3 out of 4 psychic powers, so I didn't get prescience off, I didn't get death hex off to try and remove that custom force field save and shoot down his flying jet. But I did play very cleverly in order to try and counter and remove biker units and force some of those morale saves. Biker units are great, orcs are great in big numbers, but biker units, when they all get all separated up and you start whittling them down, they're not as reliable in morale as say a unit of 30 boys that can take an awful lot of death before they start suffering to morale. So the game lasted, I think, 3 turns in the end, and then we had to call it there, not because of time, but because the objective of the game was to secure 4 of the objectives at the end of the game. They were worth 3 points each. He managed to achieve Slay the Warlord, I managed to achieve First Blood, but he was down to 1 unit of bikes and 1 character on a bike by the end of that 3rd turn. I still had enough units to then move in and secure the remaining objectives, so we felt that there was no need to progress the game to its conclusion. So we called it at that point there. But it was a great game. Ian's a great guy to play. He knows his orcs. He knows that list pretty well. He's been playing orcs for a number of years. I know he's looking forward to a codex to get access to some really cool stratagems. Certainly things like Dakar, which has a stratagem at the moment, but in the new codex we know that every orc's going to get it. But it was certainly a good test for me to try and remember all these different combinations. So I've mentioned the combinations in this video before, and I mentioned them in my own in-depth videos, but you try and remember them in the heat of battle and trying to apply them to the right targets at the right times and roll the right dice and get the right combinations. That's what playtesting is all about. But hopefully I think I've worked out exactly how I want the list to play. All I need to do is actually get those psychic powers off. That's always a good thing to do. There is a stratagem to get +2 to a psychic power, but you know, I can only use that on 1 guy if I really need a power to go off. So that means I've had 2 full play tests with this list now. Both have resulted in sensible victories, although the one against the Ultramarines may have gone slightly badly if we played any more turns. But I'm really happy with the way the list plays. All I need to do is just learn it that little bit more so that I'm not going to be slow playing or constantly looking at rules and everything else. I've actually printed out myself a little crib sheet. So all of the units that I've got, I've printed out their own little sheet, and I've printed out myself some little crib notes as well, so that I remember to regenerate wounds at the start of my turn on the Forge Fiend and the Mutalith. And I remember to use a particular combination, and so on. Just little notes to help me through the game, and also not force the game to sort of drag on, so that we try and get as many turns in the time limit as possible. I've seen a few games recently, particularly I was watching one of the Nova Open just this weekend, and it was a Custodians list versus an Imperial Soup list, and they were being accused in the chat and locally for slow play. Now, Custodians list, you know, a full jet bike Custodians list shouldn't be playing slow. There's not very many models. I think there was 20 odd bikes, and then he had a Imperial Guard farming unit for the command points, but it looked really slow. It looked terrible on Twitch, to be honest, but I don't want to be that guy that gets accused of slow play. I just need to know my list that bit better. But I hope you enjoyed this quick update. I hope you learned something new. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.